All right, everyone, we are back with another episode of the Announcers Hour. I'm your host, Patrick McCall, but today we have another great voice from the Magic City. It is Gavin Bicho, who is here, the current sports director at WVUM 90.5 FM, the University of Miami. And Gavin, how's it going?
It's going great. Can't wait to get this thing going. I'm glad, to be on here and thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, can you tell people kind of what's your role with being the sports director and all the things you kind of have to do with that?
I mean, man, what don't I do? So I'm the sports director, so it's not like I run the whole station, but the sports side specifically, WVUM Sports, for the University of Miami student radio station. What that entails is scheduling, calling, broadcast for six Miami team programs. So that would be women's soccer, women's volleyball, football, women's and men's basketball, and baseball. And we're fortunate enough to be the flagship station, the main station for women's basketball and baseball. So that includes going on road trips, neutral site games, interviews with the coaches before and after for women's basketball, and then a once a week interview with Coach JD or the baseball coach with the baseball team as well. So a lot goes into it with our production on that side. But yeah, just recruiting broadcasters, scheduling broadcasters, being in constant contact with SIDs from all sports, and just a lot of communication needed between not only you and your staff, but also the rest of the WVUM executive board, with the deans. There's a lot of little things. It could be, telling Max Keller to go produce in the studio, or it's emailing Dean Prepke to make sure that we have Kane card access to the office in the studio. So it also goes into that as a big part that I'm doing now is underwriting. So that's a big part of our station and what kind of keeps us going, especially the sports station that travels. Not all of our trips are paid for. We are very fortunate for that. For women's basketball, we do get that luxury, but for baseball, that's not the case. So I have to go to as many people as possible and say, hey, we'll give you a read. We'll shout you guys out in our broadcast, but we need some money so we can go on these trips and start and keep providing high quality broadcasts and a service to the fans. So just going around to local businesses and trying to get them to buy into our product and what we do. And I take a lot of pride in it. Every aspect, from the producing to the broadcasting to the underwriting to the recruiting to all the little things, just trying to make this as professional as possible. Because I don't think there's personally a place in the rest of the country where you can get this much experience right into college. Like you don't have to wait at all. Like you start as a freshman, you get right into it. You can be traveling on the road, doing all these certain things that, say, if you went to a competitive school or somewhere else, you might not get the opportunities. So I think we provide amazing opportunities, and the product that we give, I think, is phenomenal. But that kind of goes in what the sports director has to do, which is basically the ins and outs. And really, you learn a lot as you do it. You can't really learn everything. There's random situations, but that's pretty much basic overview of it.
Definitely. And I brought that up because I know a lot of people that might be like applying for a sports job will see sports director, and it definitely varies depending on where you are as far as your duties. But, with that being said, I know you talked about getting into kind of relationships with the other businesses and stuff in the area. And I know this is something our former guest, Nick Marino, kind of touched on, but how much like do you have to, I guess, be in sales in that way and, get to build those relationships?
Well, luckily for me, Nick and previous sports directors left just an amazing backbone for support. We've had sponsors like the Big Cheese for decades, right? We have had Sports Hall of Fame, Gerard. We've had plenty of people that have been recurring, and here and there we'll pick up another business or two for basketball, football, and then they'll come into baseball. But a lot of the groundwork has been laid out that way. But it's more of just keeping that relationship, maintaining that presence that you have with these people that take WVUM very seriously, because we are the flagship station for baseball, and baseball is one of those sports where it's very much geared towards radio than really any other sport. It's the most historic, it's America's pastime. And so I think that's huge in terms of the presence that we have, the fact that we are the number one radio station for uh, baseball, which is, again, a very radio geared sport, or can be. And, you can be sitting at the ballpark. We have fans sit there and listen to the game while they're watching it. It's a different type of kind of broadcast when you feel like you have people actually listening and trying to, like, don't you don't want to mess up stuff like that. But so the businesses get that. They understand that they treat us like we're a professional company, which you would love that because you don't want someone to think, oh, student radio, whatever, like this, and that. They take you very seriously. The fans take you seriously. And so I think it's very important, especially for someone like myself or any broadcasters that I go and say, hey, go email UM Sports Hall of Fame, go walk in and see if you can get something done with what we got going on for them. And so actually the other day I was meeting with Mark, a sponsor who goes to almost every Miami Hurricanes sporting event, who runs bartending classes, but he's also on the board at the Hall of Fame. So I had a meeting with him at the Hall of Fame, kind of took care of the Hall of Fame and Mark at the same time. We had great conversations. We're talking about potentially doing a live broadcast hour from the bowling tournament and interview Katie Meyer and a lot of other people that are going to be there, Miami Hurricane legends. So just those kind of connections that you have and just keeping those up is so crucial. And again, that's the fact that the groundwork's been there, but keeping it up and showing a good face for the brand and for the station is something that I take very seriously and something that I am very passionate in. And I think so far you're doing a great job with that. At least that's what I've heard.
Definitely. And, that you brought it up. I mean, what was your kind of reaction to both Katie Meyer and then Jim Larinaga stepping down in your time as a student?
I mean, listen, Katie Meyer is tough. I actually have a class with her this year. Teaches about NIL and college athletics. Very interesting stuff. I love it. She's very passionate, but as a young broadcaster, you hear these stories. Oh, she'll be tough on you if you ask bad questions. Oh, she'll leave out of your interview, and you think in your head, okay, but like, how bad can that be? Until you're doing a broadcast and the Comrex dies, and she walks away after a loss against number 25 Michigan, and you're like, what? So it was nerve-wracking dealing with her because you see her in a lot of these other situations where you either go to a practice or you go to see her outside of the facility or when she's with the national media. Everyone loves her. Her presence is great. And you agree with that. But when you talk to her right before a game and right after a game, like she's a competitor, man. Like she wants to worry about winning the game. And so to be a student broadcaster and work with her at the probably two worst times she wants to deal with anyone, not even students, but anyone not pertaining to her team, it challenges you to be a very good listener, a very good interviewer. And it makes you improve upon what you do because she is one of the toughest interviews you're gonna have to give right before a game or right after a game. It got to the point where I had to like root for Miami to win, but also to be like, I really want her to be happy. And I think at the end of the day, through 2 years of that, that made me a better interviewer, made me a better broadcaster. It made me more aware of what matters, what goes on, what coaches go through. So, it was bittersweet seeing her go because it always was in your head mentally like, man, she's really tough, but I'm better because of that. And I think that's the way she kind of ran her team, where, in the moments when she needed you, it was tough, but it was tough love, and you got better because of it. So it did stink to see her go because I think by the time I created a pretty good relationship with her and her staff, but then Trisha came in right away and was super accommodating. I had about a 15-minute conversation with her back in the spring, and she's really nice as well. A lot different than Katie Meyer. But some of the same faces on that staff. Lynette's still there running the behind the scenes, Margie, and obviously Coach Fitz, the associate head coach. But uh, it is a different vibe than when um, Katie was here. And to each of their own. Currently, Miami, they're on a little bit, they're struggling a little bit, but a lot of games there that they could have gone the other way. And it just an odd year for Miami Hurricanes women's basketball, but hopefully they can start getting a run here at the end of the season. And then for the men's, I just felt like it was not a, I think it was eminent that he was on his way out, Larinaga. But I do think that his relationship with Bill Courtney, personally, and this is conjuncture, but I think his relationship with Bill Courtney kind of made the situation what it was. I think that, Bill Courtney was waiting in the wings. He's coached for so many years with Larinaga that he felt that Larinaga was like, all right, I'm going to step down, but I want to make sure I see it through to Bill get the job, right? And I think Dan Radakovich has made two hires, right? One of them outside with Trisha Cullop, and that's a great non-conference. They didn't really play many people, but it's still hard to get wins. And they're struggling in the ACC, but that's women's basketball. And they made an inside hire with JD Arteaga, which obviously after last year, people are upset with the way the team performed. hopefully a lot better this year baseball wise. So I think he's definitely at a crossroads. We're like, all right, I've done one of each, and I don't know how to feel about either. So he kind of met in the middle where it's like, okay, I'll let Bill interim. If he does great, maybe give him the job. If not, I don't know. And right now, obviously, I think it's more than just Bill Courtney. I think it's the way the team's been constructed, the way the team's been playing. You have these guys coming in that are averaging 20 points a game elsewhere, and Jalen Blackman's going 1 for 20 from three in ACC play. I think it's just unfortunate the on-court play, but I think they're really young. I think they're misunderstood. Probably a little too high in the preseason ratings, but it did stink to see Jim go as well because he was a legend. But I think the Katie departure was a lot more shocking, just because she's younger, a lot younger than Jim, and I think Coach Al was on his way out in the next year or two. But a lot of change, and it's a lot of getting used to for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's a lot of detail I know on all the coaches, especially, but I mean, definitely, like you mentioned with Radakovic having to make moves. I mean, anybody at Miami is kind of under the gun, so to speak, to where you got to be have that pressure
100%.
to win. But actually, it's funny that you brought up kind of asking questions to a lot of different coaches because that's something I know a lot of people have to do. And I remember specifically speaking on Katie Meyer as kind of a tougher person to, if you ask a dumb question, I think she walked away when I was bringing up, I was like prefacing a question to get into like a more positive side because it was something with the turnovers where a prior question kind of upset her and then she ended up walking away. So that was kind of a learning moment. But, in saying that, how do you, if you know you have a tough coach and then a slightly easier coach to deal with as far as asking the questions, how will you kind of prepare those? And then especially if that's kind of coming on the fly, like with information changing, especially with you could be doing a live broadcast and have to kind of change your questions like mid-game.
Yeah, so certainly it's a lot easier pregame because you obviously have a lot of time um to get ready for it, right? Not on the fly as you mentioned on a post-game interview. So pregame, it's usually the same for both coaches now because it's more, all right, this is what your team did in the last couple of games. If there was any certain shift in the way the team was playing, what has led to that? Maybe a problem from the past they've started to resolve, and how they continue to do that. And then you look at the other team, what they've done, and I like to point out a player or two that's had a big impact in a recent stretch, right? So it might not be the best player, but could be a player that's dropped 15 points, averaging 15 in the last four. All right, she's hot. No one can stop her recently. How do we go through that? So I kind of ask them more recent questions instead of these overarching questions pregame because they're locked into the game. The last thing you want to do is say, hey, so you have a game next week. What do you think about that in this big stretch ahead of you? Or it's like down the road, it's like, no, just keep it to the game. That's what it's there for. If you do a pregame interview every game, those long, broad questions, they don't matter because you can have updated questions every single week or every game, whatever that may be. Post game, mentally, I think in my head around the fourth quarter or end of the game, second half, fourth quarter, what are the turning points? What are the key points of this game? Is it the turnover margin? Is it the rebounding? Was there a stretch where Miami just came out a little flat and that's the reason why they didn't lose? So I think that the questions are kind of the same as well, but almost the delivery is different in the way you ask. I could ask Trisha Culp, your team minus 12 on the turnover margin seems to be something that has been an issue as of late. What did you see today that you might have liked a little better, and how can you improve upon that? If it was something like a Katie Meyer, I'd say, obviously turnovers were an issue, but you guys were able to capitalize defensively. How crucial was that for you today to not let those turnovers become a big effect in the game, right? Something like that, the way you deliver it. But yeah, you definitely really have to be like, it's tough because you can't really have many mistakes. With something like KMI, like you got to be perfect almost. And again, made me better, but I had to be clear. I had to ask concise, clear questions. And then especially after a loss, two or three questions, depending on her answers, she would give one long last like spiel, and you knew that that was that. Don't want to ask her another question because she'll just leave. So you kind of have to read the room, and honestly, it's like you got to listen just as much as you got to ask with a Katie Meyer compared to Trisha Culp because you just rattle off questions and that'll get done with Trisha Culp. With Katie Meyer, you kind of had to bounce off what she was saying because she would only want to talk about certain points and she kind of have to stick with those points and go with that. And then the moment you feel like she's going a little long-winded and giving a final overall speech with the way her tone is, you should be like, all right, I think we're good here. So it's a lot more than just asking questions to Katie Meyer, although the questions may be similar. You got to listen, you got to be clear, concise, and just know when it's time to shut up, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, if anybody's wondering more about Katie Minor personality, I know like a bigger example to relate it to is if I've seen probably a lot of different examples over the years of like Greg Popovich, kind of press conferences. It's kind of like that to where you can get great answers, but then if it's like there's any sliver of a doubt that the question isn't either relevant or great at the time, then you're probably going to get shut down. So that's just kind of a way I'd relate it to. And, speaking on the broadcasting side, what is kind of the biggest thing you've already learned just in getting right into broadcasting at Miami?
I think just finding your voice, honestly, and that's really with any broadcaster. When I was in high school, I had a podcast, and I sometimes I go back to like my sophomore year, I listened to like my voice then, and it was like shaky, tumbly, raspy, fast, whatever. But similar to just hopping in freshman year, if you had no experiences, just talking over the radio or talking over air and just getting used to being live and being, ready to go on your toes and, taking things step by step and adapting to what's happening on the floor or what's around you. And again, that only comes with experience. You can do so much in the classroom. You can know the X's and O's. You can know what's the right thing to say and do it, but it doesn't matter unless you go out there and do it. And that's why those reps, especially as a freshman and sophomore, are so crucial and those first road trips because you start to understand how things work, how teams function, how coaches prepare. And it just helps you get a better grasp of the game and the team itself. And it makes you more a fan because you know how much work goes into certain things, just like how much work goes into preparing for a broadcast. So, again, those types of things you only get from doing it and doing the experience and finding your voice and getting comfortable on air and going through those first early ugly stages to then become more a confident broadcaster. So that definitely is what it is for me is finding your voice, getting that experience and making mistakes basically. Because again, learn as much as you want, get an A+ on your writing test or journalism ethics, great. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't translate to on air. So that's what I think.
Yeah, and the reps is such a big thing, and that's what
Totally.
was key about Miami and a lot of schools to where it maybe isn't even getting the is necessarily the national notoriety at all times, but it's definitely because they have more experience, you're getting a lot of benefit from that. And by the way, were there any broadcasters you kind of looked up to, like going in or even now that you're kind of learning things from?
I mean, the sports world is so different nowadays. When I was a kid, definitely, but there's so many personalities that I think that are inspiring to watch, to see them talk about certain things. Obviously, I mean this seriously, but typically the part of my take guys like Big Cat, Pia, they take ways to spin sports in a funnier way, but they're very passionate, right? So there's one avenue to be like, okay, if I want to lighten things up, how can I do that? Or take guy Gus Johnson, right? Over the top, really emphatic, crazy calls, right? You can take parts of that when you need it. I really do like. I'm trying to think top of my head here. I mean. I think Kirk Herbstreit is phenomenal. It's the way that he's able to not only tell you what happened as a color commentator, but why it's important. I think is crucial. He does a great job not just giving you the basics in terms of color commentary, but he really gives you the whole story. And he's very smart at that level. Um, I would say those. I mean, Tom Brenneman, I met him a couple weeks ago at the Miami game. I know he's had his past, but throughout his broadcasting career, he's been phenomenal at painting a story as a play-by-play guy, in big moments too. He's at CW now, but he's someone that I talk to who's really helpful, and he's someone that I watch his games a lot. I watch the highlights of games that he's called because I think he's very good at football. I think baseball and basketball, he does it at a very high level. So I say like kind of a mixture. I think it's tough to say one person because at the end of the day, it's all about being yourself. You don't want to copy someone else. You want to be yourself. If you're not authentic, you're not going to be good. So I take bits and pieces from each, and not just broadcasters, but also influencers and personalities and stuff like that, because it just helps broaden your kind of perspective, your range, your knowledge. So I would say that.
Definitely. And, by the way, did you get any experience in high school or you be kind of going in a little bit knowing you wanted to do it in college, but not really sure yet?
Yeah. So. in high school or throughout my childhood, I had season tickets to University of Rhode Island men's basketball, and that was during the Dan Hurley days when he was there for a couple of years. So I was a diehard fan. And then around high school, I don't know why, but I found like podcast equipment. I found like a microphone in my house. I was like, I have all this knowledge. I go to every game. Why not make a podcast? So I started with that. I did that for a couple years, and I had to interview some players. I got like a coach on once and some other reporters, talked to them. Those are still connections that I have to this day. Maury Hirschgordon, one of them was the sports director at WPRI 12 in Providence, is now one of the main guys at Channel 7 in Boston. Like, hold on to those certain things was huge for me. But then when COVID happened, they cut attendance to all high school basketball games, and for a while, we had a broadcast journalism class, and that teacher had been trying to kickstart live streams for games. But once they cut attendance to all the sporting events, then that really became something that was um, very popular. And he wanted to do it by not through NFHS or paid service, but YouTube, live stream for free, score bug and everything. He wanted to make a great product. And so it started off with basketball before COVID shut everything down. I did my first game. I'd never done one before. I just did it. He called me. It was like the Thursday before the Friday, everything shut down. I was a sophomore in high school. I was like, he got my phone number from like my dad or whatever. He's like, listen, I got a game in an hour. We're throwing a broadcast. I know you like to do basketball. Can you commentate? I was like, are you kidding me? This is my dream. So I did it. And the season ended, but then soccer season came around and basketball season came around again. And so we really kind of pioneered a live stream service for high school sports for free. We even had a story done on it my senior year of high school on WPRI 12. That was really cool. But I probably did about I did a soccer game. It was tough for me because I played two sports. I played baseball and football, so I can only do winter really. But I did 25, 30 basketball games along with the podcast prior. So that definitely helped me out coming into college. But again, it's a whole different ball game, and it's an exponential growth. So the steps I was taking then necessarily are not nearly as close to the steps that I'm trying to take now. So I'm just trying to get better all the time. And yeah, having that baseline is really good, but I tell all new broadcasters, you don't have to have that baseline because you're at a point right now where you're gonna have a lot of reps. You're broadcasting Power Four sports. You're at Miami. You have people around you that are not only great broadcasters but great teachers and people that have a lot of knowledge. So I did have that experience, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good note because I've seen a lot of people just now like they're already in high school and then trying to like build something like you were to where they're making a podcast or like a YouTube channel, whatever it is, to get some type of like experience. And I think that's really valuable going in. But by the way, how did you end up choosing Miami to go to as like a school? Because I'm sure you had plenty of options.
Man, I was really it was probably the toughest decision of my life. And that's why I'm so proud to be a Miami Hurricane, is because it wasn't easy at all. Both my parents went to University of Rhode Island. I'm from Rhode Island. All my best friends went to URI, and I knew that with how passionate I was, that I thought that I could go anywhere and still end up positive on the right side of things. Like I could have gone to a smaller school or bigger school. I feel like I would have been the best out of either situation. So I wasn't necessarily thinking, all right, well, I'm going to apply to the 20 best communication schools, broadcast schools, and then just call it a day. I knew URI had a growing program. I obviously was in love with the team, had a podcast. I knew all the connections of all the URI beat writers, all the news anchors and the news, the sports guys, stuff like that. And um, I applied to Syracuse, Clemson, Georgia, Miami, Maryland, and URI, and I told all of them except um, Maryland. But in my head, I knew that it was going to come down to URI and some other school, right? So basically, it was what school, not URI, was the best for me. And I came down to Miami first. I was like, this is great. I didn't really know how much of like I didn't know about WVUM. I didn't know about UMTV, but I just felt the campus. I was like, this is sick, like great campus, beautiful weather. But I guess it's what a college campus is, right? It's gonna be nice, right? So I set Miami as the baseline, right? If that's the bar, I thought schools would be on par or above. I was nowhere near close. I went to Syracuse, and that's just a tough commute. It's like 6 hours, and I was like, 6 hours away, the cold. It's really, really competitive. Not saying again that I wouldn't want to be a part of that, but I felt that there's other areas where I can get more opportunities. I went to Clemson and Georgia and felt like Georgia was way too big. I ended up getting deferred. I don't even know if I got in or not. I didn't even check the updated status, whatever it was. And then Clemson, I just felt like their program in terms of I looked up their program. It was nowhere near where Miami's was. So I was like, all right, Miami, URI. I felt like I could always go back to URI, but there's no way you can go to Miami. And I would never forgive myself if I made the choice to stay home and not go to Miami and try it out at least. So then I went to Miami and I tried everything. I was so far away from home and so displaced that I was like, all right, the only way I can fill my time is do UMTV, do WVUM. And through that, I found relationships with a lot of people who I still hold to this day. Nick Marino, the former sports director, he's up in Fort Lauderdale. We hang out a good amount. We go get some food every once in a while just because he's a really good friend of mine now. He's one of the first people early on that really helped me out as his when he was the director his junior year, getting me games, getting that experience. And so it was a slow but steady love for Miami as I got into it. I'm not going to say I didn't think about transferring, but it was always like, I can stick it out, I can do it, I can do it. And then by like my second semester, I was like, this place is so amazing. I got my relationships that I had with a lot of people just got bigger and bigger, and then the people that I started to know within the sports department at WVUM grew as well, and that community was great. And ever since that, I never looked back. And there's no other place I'd rather be than Miami. And when anyone's talking about broadcasting and they mention Miami, that they should go, they always get a resounding yes, A plus. I don't know why you go to anywhere else, but listen, it's your choice. Congratulations. But Miami, if you want to do this, like I think this is one of the most slept on schools in the country. I think it's one of the best schools in the country. Take a look at what UMTV does, crank out awards every semester for multiple different shows. WVUM, you're a flagship station for one of the biggest baseball programs in all of college baseball history, and then a women's basketball team that is pretty relevant, especially with the players that are on the team. You get that, and it's very, very hard. I don't know if I can find another program elsewhere that offers those same kind of opportunities. And so you mix that in with the Miami, the fun, the parties, the bars, the stuff like that, and all the distractions, right? But with all your friends, it's second to none, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And I would recommend anyone that's serious about broadcasting to seriously look into the University of Miami because it really is a special place.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that you touched on all aspects of that because I thought I thought I had a way different experience in choosing a college and everything, but I know it's like different for everyone. But I like that you mentioned that, it does kind of come down to no matter where you're going to go, is just like putting in the same amount of effort and trying to,
Right.
make the most of what the advantages are at that school. Because at the end of the day, that's probably going to end up carrying you over the long run compared to the school. So it's not always like as life-changing maybe of a decision as people might think it is. But I just remember, yeah, my point actually, I didn't visit any of the schools I like applied to except for kind of like soft visiting Arizona State because my brother was out there and I had just been to Phoenix and I had never been to Miami and ended up coming down. So yeah, everyone out there, if you're thinking about it, just take a chance and go where you want to go to broadcast. But moving on, I know you broadcast a lot of different sports. Are there any that you played and feel like did that give you more insight on the game?
Yeah, I would definitely say I played football and baseball my whole life, played basketball to like freshman year of high school, but those sports were very seasonal for me. I mean, I love football, I still do. But the sport I understand the most is basketball. Just in terms of from um I before I even got to college, I went to over 100 and something college basketball games from seventh grade to senior year of high school. Like when you not only play, and I had a young coach in my middle school days, and he was a walk-on at Massachusetts when John Calipari was there. So he was a very good coach. He explained things really well. I learned the game so much from him. And then to go to an immense amount of college basketball games and seeing how the game is played and seeing how certain situations roll out. I'm most comfortable with that. But I do love baseball. I love the relaxed part of baseball where you really can just, it's not always game. It's like you set the scene, you paint a picture. I really enjoy that. I love storytelling. So baseball is like the best, and not storytelling as in, you know, you know, Brian Walters went to the park the other day and he walked his dog and he said, "What a great day." No, it's like tell the story of the game, why it's important, why it matters, what could it mean for certain players, teams, coaches. That's the story I like to tell. And I can, of course, weave in those anecdotes from other players, but I love setting a scene and making the viewer know why things are important. So I love baseball in that sense. I think football is a little mix of both between um, baseball and basketball, where it's fast paced, stop. But again, I still think basketball, Division I college basketball is, I'd say I'm a junkie for it, and it's a sport. I know the most the teams. I know almost every team in all Division I. And it's one of those things that I'm really passionate about. And like one of my goals as a broadcaster, I want to do the Final Four one day on a network. So whatever that is, whether it's still CBS, like that's my goal. But I just understand the game of basketball a little. I think it's a little, obviously a little more simple than like the rest, but I love the complexities, the plays, the I love watching, coaches go over highlights and films and writing, baseline out of bounds plays or like 2 3 man beaters. What do you do? And so learning that information for me is fun because it's kind of like it's a puzzle and I love it. So I'd say basketball, even though I didn't play it all throughout high school.
Definitely. And do you remember any, now that you had a little bit of games and stuff, like speaking on the technicalities of the broadcast side, do you remember any crazy in-game circumstances, weird rules, or anything like that, to where you had to really have an awkward on-air learning lesson or something like that that just tripped you up?
Um, Trying to think. It happens a lot. I mean, I remember one was really awkward. And this wasn't necessarily a weird rule, but it was Miami Louisville last year, and I was doing it with Nick. And I want to say a Miami running back ripped a long touchdown down the sideline, had like a spin move, a juke move, and I was going word for word, syllable for syllable. I'm thinking about like this is it. This is like my pinned highlight, right? This is gonna be it. Dives for the end zone, touchdown, and the ref calls him short at the one. But then in my head, I'm like, it looked like I swear I was like, that's a touchdown. Like, I don't know how you call that, and it was like quiet, dead because the refs were like, what was he short? Like we were in the corner, but I thought he got in, and it was a touchdown. They overruled it, and it was just kind of a weird pause where it's like, what do you do there when it's like you're very certain it's something, and it ends up being right, but not the first time around. And just that was I kind of managed that in an odd way. So I would say that, but there's always little things here and there where you're confused about or where you jump the gun. I think there's a couple rules in basketball where people don't really know what's going on in terms of if there's a foul off the shot goes in. Do they get ball? Do they get extra free throw? Hook and holds are always weird offensively in the paint. It's strange. Um, but I would say that game was kind of strange because of the way I portrayed it. So I'm still working on how to kind of break those pauses, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head besides that. I mean, I've done volleyball and soccer games where I had no clue what a rule was because I'm not as versed in those, and I'm trying to become, obviously, more knowledgeable about those sports, but just trying to do my best to portray the message and the story of the game to the audience, whether I get it perfect or not. I'll go back and work on it, but yeah,
Oh yeah, I think that's a great example, and I brought that up just kind of touch on the point a little bit because that's probably if you're just getting into like broadcasting. I think that's probably that's kind of the most uncomfortable moment outside of the
yeah,
first time getting on air and getting through, the first bumps or whatever. But once you get to a situation where it's really you didn't know how to like handle it, or it's a very close call and you kind of jump the gun, like I remember an easy one to do is on a field goal on like a home run where you're not sure if it's fair or foul, stuff
yeah.
like that. I guess I would say the best thing you can do is just kind of wait like a few seconds at least
Yeah.
before you, and
And
that's yeah.
especially being on radio, you have that, you know, what am I looking for? I forget the word I'm looking for. I don't know, I lost in my head. Uh, but if you have the ability to stay back a second or two. I remember when I was starting off and I would go step for step, right? And I know they always say you get in front of the call. Like baseball, you always be in front. But I'd do basketball games and I would be step for step with the players. And sometimes it'd be like, and he passes, shoots it. No, no, passes it over the corner. Now it's a shot. No pump fake, drives to the baseline, shoots, goes, no. So like, I felt myself like second guessing or just because they're moving so fast. So especially in basketball, I'd say a step behind just so I can tell what actually happened. But something like that where it's okay to like let the whistle blow. And the whistle on the play, it looks like it could be a foul. It will be, but on Virginia Tech, a moving screen, it's Miami's ball. Instead of, oh, it's a collision, it might be on Miami. No, wait, it's on Virginia Tech. It's going the other way. You know what I mean? So that's yeah. So I like to stay step behind basketball, especially because a lot of those things. But baseball, it's tough because the ball moves so fast where you lose sight of it for 1 second, you're really behind, and it's not going to be that great. Your viewers aren't going to, or listeners rather, aren't going to like it that much. But at the end of the day, you just try your best to stay on top of things.
Overall transitioned off the Zoom flip. I gotta say, Gavin, this meeting is going better than I did the one recently with Jake Eisenberg. My
Yeah.
webcam literally bricked like halfway through, so
Oh
I'm like,
wow.
okay, I lost that one.
This
So
is
good
good. This is
that
good.
that's a better that we're on to the next webcam. But in your opinion, with the storytelling, bouncing off the technical aspect, I know you talked about telling stories, and that's such a big thing that I feel like a lot of people getting into broadcasting hear about. So how do you personally manage that on air, and then like by sport, or what are the kind of things you've heard that are like good advice?
Personally, I would say the things that I learned from Rich Hollenberg was he always wrote down on his notes win and like the plus sign, like win and like why does this game matter? Like win in what? Like, what happens if this team wins? So before every game, I'm always writing, all right, win and Miami's first ACC win, Bill Courtney's first win as interim head coach, first win against an ACC team since February of 2024, snaps the longest losing streak in the country against Power Four. And then I go the other side. I'm like, all right, Virginia win, and they get their first true road win of the season. They get their second straight win against Miami and first against them in Miami since 2015, whatever it may be. So those are little ways that I can help storytell because you can kind of dive into each section more depending on how much time you have. But you come out of the break and it's Miami back here at the Watsco Center against Virginia, down 5, 12 minutes to go as Miami's looking for their first ever ACC win and Virginia looking for their first ever road win. Last time they won a road game was back on um, a certain time, and then you can kind of go deep into that and then come back to the game. So you can have these certain things that you want to mention when you come out of a break or when there's a stoppage in play that help kind of portray why the game matters, and then you can dive into those little pieces if you have more time and if it permits. About the last time I played at the Watsco Center, it was 6 versus 22, one of Miami's biggest wins in the 2020s, right? So it allows you to do that when you kind of start off very simple, and then as time goes on, if you have a little more time, dive in a little deeper.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's always interesting to see how that breakdown in baseball is compared to a sport like basketball. There's a lot less time to tell the stories. But, in baseball specifically, have you ever had any funny stories that you can remember from maybe being around the team or stuff like that?
I mean, for around the team, I wouldn't say so. I mean, baseball team is a baseball team. They're very with each other, right? It's very rare you really mesh with the baseball team as a broadcaster from the outside. And I'm going to learn what that's like. I'm working in the summer here with the baseball team, so I don't know how that's going to be. But with my experience from Miami, it's like they're all about them, and rightfully so. We're just the student broadcasters, right? We do this thing, but like they're the ones playing on the field, and they're very well with each other. So we don't really get involved as much with the players unless there's someone that's in your class or something like that that you can talk to here and there. But in terms of just funny moments. I just remember myself and Nick Marino were up at Florida last no 2 years ago, my freshman year, and it was end of the game, ninth inning. Miami was down, I think by six. I think it was 10-4 was the final. But that day we were driving up and we stopped off and got Wendy's, and the worker there was overwhelmed, was yelling at everyone, ended up giving us free nuggets or whatever it was, something stupid, but something that we thought was hilarious. We were like, all right, we got to work this somehow into the broadcast because we're down six. We're trying to keep it lighthearted right now, and we're just trying to get on and have a good time here. And I remember there was a call that I don't think one of the pitchers for Florida didn't like, and I was like, um, almost as mad as that worker in Fort Drum or something about the Wendy's worker, and we both had a good laugh about it on air. But certain things like that just remind you that you're here to have a good time, and of course you want to be professional on every single aspect, but it's certainly not out of your rights to go and like say try to mix something in or an inside joke or a story that will make the audience laugh because that's part of it. So I would say that, and we'd always try to do that when we had a game. I think opening day last year, there was a Division 3 baseball player, and my older brother played Division 3 football, and they're from the same league, the conference. I was like, NJ Tech has got three players from Division 3 on their starting lineup, all from the Liberty League. And then Nick was like, shout out Union College, their holder, shout out Union College football. I always thought that because my brother was the holder and all he did was hold. He's like, I always thought the holder was the biggest part of a team. And just shout out Kyle Bicho there. And it was just like a fun thing. We would just riff a little bit here and there about things we would want to bring up. And we were never shy to kind of push the needle and make ourselves laugh a little bit. Because at the end of the day, you're at a baseball game. It's 3 hours long, sometimes three and a half. So you just kind of go with the flow and make sure you're having a good time. And if you're having a good time, 99% of the time, the listeners will have a great time. So.
Yeah, I feel like if it's not as conversational in terms of baseball, it can get a little bit dry at times, or like if you don't have
Right.
those fun anecdotes over the course of a
Exactly.
long
I
game.
mean,
And
you look at like the Phillies broadcasters, they have a
yeah,
great time. I love watching them because they bring up stories that don't even matter to the game, but in terms of the certain game, but in the overall aspect, there's some sort of relation. And again, it keeps the audience watching, keeps everyone tuned in. Everyone laughs, it makes everyone happy. So stuff like that. Of course, I can go out there and rip a 3 hour comedy set. That's not what you're supposed to do. But again, some people get on the mic and they think it's like, first of all, that they have like a welcome back to the ball game here, Miami taking out whatever. You're not yourself, right? And I remember about you, from when I talked to you, and then I would hear you call. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's got it. Like I remember our first game we did. I think it was the Barry University game, the women's basketball scrimmage, and you got on there. I was like, this kid is like, whoa. And so, but yeah, some people are just not are afraid to let it out. But once you do, it's like that's what you want. And I feel like some of the best broadcasters of our age can kind of weave that comedic aspect, personal anecdote aspect into a game for everyone to enjoy.
yeah, for sure. And by the way, I don't know if you've done a ton of I feel like a lot of people in the WVM circle have. Like, I don't know if you've gotten to those baseball summer leagues yet and
I
stuff like that,
will
or this
this
your first
summer,
one.
but yeah,
But you'll learn a lot about as far as, I mean, even if you're just doing the home games, like just showing up every day, but certainly if you're going on the road and doing every game, there's going to be a lot of stories and a lot of them you
yeah.
can't tell on the air, but that's a
Some
whole
you
nother
can,
thing.
and yeah, some
Yeah,
you let them rip and you have a good time with it. Yeah, so no, I'm very excited for that, but I haven't done that yet, and that's one thing that I'm super excited to take on is following a team for a whole entire season, right? And not getting a quarter or a fifth of a year and kind of knowing all the pieces, but not necessarily understanding what they mean and such like that. So I'm excited to do that for the first time and really get that whole grasp of an entire season's work.
for sure. And do you have, because looking ahead to it, do you have any big role that you want to be in, like out of university specifically, or any, I don't know, j job that you'd want to take on or even would consider? Because a lot of guys, like even on the play-by-play sphere, only specifically, they might start out like doing TV and then just happened into play-by-play. You see a lot of that transition. So is there anything that you're all considering at this point?
Listen, I'll take whatever's given to me. I'm gonna weigh out my options, see what's best for me and in my life and what I think I can do, and what I can do confidently. I've always had an affinity for collegiate athletics, so something in that realm maybe to start. But definitely out of college, really, I'm not going to be that picky. I'm just going to try and throw out the best product I can on my reel, my resume, and just hopefully someone catches it or I get it at the right time and something pops up. But at this moment, not really. And I've been trying to kind of diversify what I've been doing here at UM. So I did join News Vision this year, so I'm an anchor for them this semester. So not only the radio side, but also the broadcasting side. Worked exclusively in JMM 445 last year on the production side of News Vision. So just trying to get control of all aspects and doing as much as I can in terms of a journalist standpoint, where I can do many different things and get a job doing one thing, not the other, and then you can freelance the broadcast, or you get a broadcasting job, and that's your job. You follow a team, you do this for a year or two, right? So I'm just really more trying to do work now to diversify that and become more well versed in many areas, so that when that time comes, I can't be picky and I'm just go with what's given.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I kind of brought that up because I know a lot of people, they might get a little bit more intimidated by looking across the landscape in media.
Right.
And then I think it's not even like you can't just be, you pick one thing, it's not necessarily over for the others. So you
Right.
got to keep
Has
that
to.
in mind, like as you get out there. But, getting back to the other broadcasting side, as far as your immediate situation, is there any, changes that, looking forward, you're trying to implement game to game, or do you have like maybe a note sheet of things that you want to improve on or get rid of as you go from game to game, or how does your, I guess, day-to-day process typically work with that?
Yeah, I would definitely say my first thing is I think everyone tries to be more efficient game note taker. I think it's very easy to write so many things down where you kind of bog down in stats and notes and not really the actual, broadcast of the game. So I think I'm still in certain sports I've gotten a system and others I really have no clue. I think in basketball, I think I've gotten pretty efficient at what I think is important, what I think is, needed to do a broadcast well, what you need. I do have a sheet of that I print out every game for a glossary of terms. The more I can not use that, the better. But it's also a tool for me to start using certain words that I like. So I would say probably work on vocabulary. You always work on your vocabulary, but just trying to get rid of all those crutch words and those awkward pauses because you don't know what word you're trying to say when a basket falls, but you don't want to say it's good, but you don't want to say money or bang or splash. And you're searching for a word and it's so late, and then you're like kind of in the middle of nowhere. So just trying to get rid of certain crutch words, be on my toes, and have a Rolodex in my head is probably my best go-to, especially with baseball coming up, because baseball is an old sport. So there is 75 words for every action in the game. Maybe take a look at a thesaurus for baseball. It's massive. So just trying to figure out what I like the most, what kind of my style is, and how I can switch things up and not say the same old things, every game. That's probably where I'm focusing on right now in both basketball and baseball.
For sure. And, looking at everything on the landscape side of it, I guess, for moving forward as well, do you kind of also have any big takes on big strategies to kind of implement like I don't know, something that you think is way into left field that a lot of people wouldn't consider? And just like an example, I know we're talking with Rich Burke, who's doing a lot of Oregon State right now, has done a million, broadcasts in the past and also for the Hillsborough Hots. But I remember on the podcast, he talked about somebody telling him that, and he's implemented it now, not using a defensive chart for baseball. And so just having to literally memorize the players as you see them. Like, have you done anything crazy like that as far as a strategy to try?
I'll tell you, when I first started doing it, I try to remember everyone's like name. Like when I did high school basketball, I would like test myself before games to memorize everyone's name because high school jerseys don't typically have the names in the back of the uniforms, which is interesting. And that's probably something I should consider getting back into. But out of left field that I'm trying to think. I know I always have some sort of glossary. I don't think that there's necessarily something that I always write down. I always have matchup history and trends. Um, but that's something I think mostly everyone uses. But I don't think I necessarily have something that really is like out of left field, just more maybe geared to what I think is more important in terms of note taking, like keeping track of conference play stats versus non-conference play stats, especially in a conference like the ACC where you have a lopsided schedule. That's important in my mind, and just some other things, but I necessarily wouldn't say really anything out of left field.
Yeah, and to me, I kind of brought that up because I think getting to speak with so many different broadcasters at this point, like I hear a lot of new strategies and different things that I know I didn't even think about and might be decent to like fit in, definitely for anyone listening moving forward. So it's always good to hear what other people are doing as far as their broadcast or different things again out of left field. But Gavin, last couple for you. Is there any Have you done a lot of the television and or streaming or YouTube side of broadcasting? It sounded like you did in high school, and then compared to going on the radio, which one do you kind of prefer? And secondly, I guess, what are the changes you like to see when you're doing those broadcasts?
I mean, I love doing it on the TV, like TV streaming, right? YouTube. I still think, not saying that I'm better or worse or enjoyed it. I just think that sometimes radio can be a mouthful, and having that time to breathe on air and kind of show a picture as well, not only just like describing everything's great, and I love doing that, but also talking about the X's and O's of the game. It's a little easier to do that on TV. And so I kind of like that better. But again, it's been 3 years since I've done that. So this summer we'll see. I'm gonna be on ESPN Plus there. So it's gonna be interesting to see back on TV. Radio, it's you gotta be explicitly directional. That's the difference right there. You can't just say Jazz Roberts brings the ball up across the timeline and passes it over to Cavender. Where's Cavender? Oh, she's on the right wing. All right, ball on the right wing. Goes inside of the low post into Cam Williams. Turns around in the cylinder. Like those words are huge. And so being explicitly directional is the biggest difference, I think, compared to TV because the audience sees it on the screen. You don't have to say, oh, has the ball in the left corner, moving to the right side, around the arc, stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's a million different ways to go into it, but generally in radio and TV, I always like to pick people's brain on what they do differently because just with that aspect of not being able to see on radio makes the broadcast incredibly different. And for anyone that's
Yeah.
going into it, we'll figure that out pretty quickly, honestly, as you get
It's a
into
good
it. But
challenge, though, especially if you're a younger broadcaster getting into it, because you learn a lot
yeah.
more than just starting on TV. That you wouldn't be as detailed as you might have been with radio, and it's a lot easier to kind of do radio first, then get to TV, and not have to say as much, basically.
Yeah, I've heard that too as being good to where I think it's easier to almost kind of transition from starting radio to going then kind of dropping back to TV because you already have the experience with having to call more. But last one for you, Gavin, do you kind of where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years and what's kind of the big goals for you?
Man, 5, 10 years. I, ooh, I love to be somewhere where, like, I'm trying to think. I love CBS Sports. I love the way they cover college basketball. I think they're second to none. I think they are the best network in terms of covering college basketball, which I love the most. So whether working as, a freelance broadcaster for them or doing a lot of things for a company like CBS and CBS Sports, I like in 10 years, if I was there, I mean, I'd be ecstatic because I just I don't know. I like the quality of their broadcasts. I like the way they kind of run things. They don't just do On the weekends, yeah, they'll have your Marquette, Wisconsin, or your Yukon, Providence. But then on Tuesday nights, you'll have your Kent State, Bowling Green. You'll have they cover the whole landscape of college basketball. You do the Mountain West, they do the MAC, the A10, the Big East. And so I kind of like the way that they handle things. So if I had to pinpoint one thing, like a college basketball broadcaster slash analyst for CBS Sports, just because I think they do it the best.
That'd be great, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you on that network
Let's
in
hope.
the
Let's hope,
future
right,
because I,
Pat?
I definitely think you can get there. So,
Thank you.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
I know a lot of great broadcasters coming from there. We could sit here and name them all, but just
Yeah,
wanted to Gavin, thank you for joining me today. It was awesome to get
of
your
course.
mind and advice,
Yeah.
opinions, everything you've learned so far. So, look forward to seeing you continue to do great work in Miami and definitely try to keep in touch.
Sounds great, Pat. Thank you for having me on.
All right, Gavin, have a good one.
Have a good one.